Hello guys, welcome back to the course Spring Boot. This is lecture 3 named Creating and Running Spring Boot Application. So far in the last lecture we have set up our development environment. We have installed Java, Postman desktop application and Spring Tool Suite. So let's begin with this lecture and we gonna have a look at Spring Tool Suite. So if you open with a default directory, you can see the screen like this. And we're gonna start with building a Spring Boot application right here. There are so many other ways to create a Spring Boot application, but for now I'm gonna start with this Maven project. So you have to right click on this package explorer, select the new option and project. Um, you have to select the Maven project and click on next. We are going to create a simple project here, so we'll check this box and click on the next. Group ID is a kind of package name that he wanted to give, so let's give this one as a com.spring.spring framework. Let's give it to the name Spring Boot start. Let's make more sense. Artifact ID is kind of a project name that you wanted to give. So let's begin with a name Spring Boot API boilerplate. Spring Boot API boilerplate. You can use this project as a reference for your all future projects. We'll start with a Hello World application and we'll grow that application to what we require. Next thing is version, because this is the very first version. 0.0.1 snapshot is fine. We can select packages like jar, pom or var. Let it be default to jar. It doesn't matter. This is optional. You can give a name to your project, but it's not mandatory, so we'll just go ahead and click finish. As soon as you click finish, you can see a project being started, and it will create a project with JRE system library. Whatever dependencies it is gonna pull, it will pull from here. The main thing is like you have a source, main, Java folder and pom.xml. So when you open a pom.xml, you can see the project, the version, group ID, artifact ID, version, and the project tag ends in here. So what we're gonna do is, this is our project, and inside this tag we want to wrap this project under a parent Spring Boot project. So we'll wrap this under a default project, which is a Spring Boot project. So we'll give group ID. Under this group ID tag, you have to give org dot spring framework dot boot. So this is your group ID, and the same way we will have artifact ID. The artifact ID for this project is Spring Boot starter parent. So Spring Boot starter parent, and a version. So version tag is important. It keeps changing, so you need to check if you are watching this video on some later point which version is required. You'll get to know about it when you run the project, and it will give you the errors. Accordingly you can just update your version. So right now I'm using 2.0.2 point release. So this is the parent tag. What we are doing here is we are wrapping our project um, to inherit the settings and configuration from this parent project, which has already been in the repository. So our pom.xml is gonna go and download all the dependencies, all the jars, and all the configuration for our project. You remember I talked about configuration and convention. So this is a convention over configuration. We don't want to configure our complete project. So we are inheriting the configuration from already built framework, and most of the time we're going to use this configuration. So next thing is dependencies. We have to download all the dependencies in this project. So you need to mention the dependencies related to this parent project. So we'll create a dependency with giving the name for this artifact ID of let's give the group ID first. So this is we are defining the dependency to download all the jars from some other already built in project and download all the configurations. So the name is org.spring framework.boot, the same that we have given as a parent project, and the artifact ID is again spring boot starter spring boot spring hyphen boot hyphen starter hyphen web. So we want to download all the web dependencies, all the jars which um, we need for this project from our parent project. This dependency tag is gonna give those files to our project, and pom.xml is gonna pull all these. Basically Maven is gonna pull all these, and we define this in pom.xml. Next thing comes is the properties tags. In the properties tag, you define the version that you are using. So java.version is the tag that we're gonna give. I'm using 1.11 because it is anything above Java 8, so you can use whatever version you want. You can see right now here it is using a 1.5 JRE system, but as soon as I gave like 1.11, it's gonna download and update in here. So let's save this project, and you have to right click on this, go to Maven and update project. Just click OK. Here you see Java Standard Edition 11, because I've mentioned 1.11, so it has updated and it had downloaded all the jars that we're gonna need for our this project. So let's move on. We are pretty much done with our configuration. Now we will go and create a start point for our project. So under the project you have source main Java folder. In this source main Java we're gonna build a class, and you have to give the package name again under which package you are making it. So we were making under com.spring boot start was our package, and you wanted to give the name to this class. So let's give state API. This class will have a static void main method. Yes guys, you heard it right, we're gonna make a main method because that's how Spring Boot gives a start, and it can be a standalone in a sense, like it can run by itself. So this is our main entry point for Spring Boot application, and this is gonna be our class where our Spring Boot application is gonna start, but we need to define this as a Spring Boot start. So for that we have annotation which will tell the compiler that this is a Spring Boot application and this is the entry point, and from here onwards this needs to load as a Spring Boot application. So we have annotation Spring Boot application. So this is the beauty of annotation, that you just need to tell it that which annotation you are using, and it's gonna get special treatment accordingly. So this is an import from Spring Boot application or .spring framework .boot .auto configure. So we're gonna import it from there, and we declare this class as a Spring Boot application. So that's it. So Spring is gonna treat this class as an entry point for the Spring Boot application, and it will execute the main method uh, under which you have to run this class and this project as a Spring application, for which you have a Spring application dot run method dot run, and it will need two parameters. The first one is which class it needs to start as a Spring application. So I did a mistake in the spelling in here, so I'm gonna refactor this class as state. There is spelling mistake. State API is the class name, and I have refactored it. So this is our start and entry point. So the primary source is always the name of the class, which is gonna be your entry point. So you give the state API dot class as the first argument, and the second argument is the args that you're gonna give. So what this method is gonna do is it's gonna tell this framework that this is a Spring application, this is start point, and you have to run the class state API as a Spring applications. Just save it, and that's it. It's pretty much done. So let's see what's going on behind the scene. So we're gonna use Spring application dot run method, and we give the main class dot class as a first argument, and the second parameter is arguments that we might see that what is the use in future. Um, we set up a default configuration using the parent project, uh, and what is happening behind the scene is it is starting application context, it is performing a class path scan, and starting a Tomcat server. These are the all steps that Spring Boot is doing behind the scene. um, we remember we have downloaded it from the default Spring Boot framework, the configuration, and then Spring framework treats everything in from application context point of view, and everything which starts goes in the scope of application context, and it decides how many number of like how they're gonna treat the different POJOs classes, and how to bind the whole application all together. And a class path scan is required for the annotations. So whatever annotations you are giving to your classes, um, the class paths can avail those annotations for the compiler to decide and treat these classes differently. And on the behind, it is using a Tomcat server to install your application in a container and run it as a standalone application. So servlet configuration is now aligned with application configuration, so you need not to worry about the servlet configuration and application configuration separately. This is how the Spring Boot helps to create a quick project, and these are the brief overview how Spring Boot application saves your time. So let's begin and run this application. So there are two options, Java application or Spring Boot application. Here's the run button. For now I'm gonna just go with a Java application, and as soon as you run this class as a Spring application, you can see here there are some other errors. You can ignore them for now, but there are a whole lot of things going on in here. You can see that Tomcat started on port 8080 with context path and started state API. JVM is running our project. So let's go and have a look at it. So localhost port 8080 is the place where our application should be listening, and it says white label error page. The application has no explicit mapping for error. Because there are no path and controller being defined for the application could not find where to go, and this error is coming, and we are not handling this error. That's why this error page is showing. So we'll fix this and we'll start working on our project from here onwards. We'll fix this, we'll show the error message or a hello world in our next lecture. But this is pretty much done. This is how we start our Spring Boot application. You can see how easy it is, just one line of code and whole lot of things being taken care at the back end for us, which includes all this. Um, and here our application has started. So this is pretty much to start a Spring Boot application, and just a small code that we need. You can see it here. It is really amazing. Alright, so see you guys on the next lecture, and we'll handle this error page and we'll write our controller probably in the next class. So see you guys.